The air smelled of pine and betrayal, sharp and bitter, as I stood on the dirt road staring at the splintered wreckage of my cabin. Shards of cedar planks jutted from the earth like broken bones. The roof caved in. Windows shattered into glittering dust. My chest tightened, a slow burn creeping up my throat. This wasn't just a house. It was my refuge, my late father's dream, the place where I'd scattered his ashes under the old oak out back. The Homeowners Association had done this. They'd bulldozed my world to the ground without so much as a warning. Karen Whitmore, their queen bee, had signed the order. I could still hear her nasal voice from last month's meeting, dripping with smug authority. Rules are rules. Detective Harper, your cabin's an eyesore. Eyesore. That word clawed at me now, echoing over the hum of cicadas in the dusk. I'm a cop. 20 years on the force. 10 as a detective. 5 prosecuting cases that put away men who thought they were untouchable. I've faced down drug lords, stared into the eyes of killers, but nothing prepared me for the gut punch of seeing my home reduced to rubble. My hands shook as I pulled my phone from my pocket, the cracked screen catching the last rays of sunlight. I dialed my partner, Ruiz. They did it, I said, voice low, barely holding together. The HOA. They tore it down. Ruiz's silence on the other end was heavy, punctuated by a long sigh. Jesus. Harper. You sure it was them? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Karen's signature was on the permit I'd found stapled to a nearby tree, flapping in the evening breeze like a taunt. The next morning, I sat in my truck outside the HOA's pristine office, a squat building with fake ivy crawling up its walls. The air inside was sterile, reeking of lemon cleaner and self-righteousness. Karen sat behind her desk, her platinum hair pulled tight, her smile as sharp as a switchblade. Detective Harper, she purred, leaning forward. I'm so sorry about your structure, but you violated Code 47B. Unapproved exterior modifications. We had no choice. No choice. The words hit like a slap. I leaned closer, my badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. You had my home destroyed. Karen, my father built that cabin with his hands. You didn't even send a notice. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but she doubled down. We sent emails. You ignored them. Rules are rules. I wanted to scream, to flip her desk and watch her perfect world shatter like mine. But I'm a cop. I play the long game. I left her office, the door clicking shut behind me, and drove straight to the precinct. Ruiz was waiting, coffee in hand, his dark eyes scanning my face. You look like hell. Harper. I didn't smile. I need everything we've got on the HOA board. Financials, permits, complaints, all of it. He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Ruiz knew me. He knew this wasn't just about a cabin. Days bled into nights as I dug. The precinct's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the smell of burnt coffee and old paper clinging to the air. I found complaints buried in city records, neighbors bullied into compliance, fines issued for minor infractions, like a mailbox painted the wrong shade of beige. The HOA was a machine, and Karen was its engine. But machines break. I found cracks, unpaid taxes on the HOA's community pool, questionable loans funneled through shell companies, and a pattern of selective enforcement that reeked of favoritism. Karen's husband, a contractor, had been hired for every major HOA project, despite his bids being double the competitors. Cozy. Then came the surprise. A woman named Lila showed up at the precinct, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder. She was small, mousy, with tired eyes and a voice that shook when she spoke. I used to work for Karen, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder like someone might be watching. She fired me when I asked about the accounts. Lila slid the folder across my desk. Inside were emails, bank statements, proof of Karen skimming dues for personal use vacations, a new SUV, even a boat docked in Miami. My pulse quickened, the papers crinkling under my grip. This was it. The smoking gun. I should have felt triumphant, but all I could think about was Dad. He'd built that cabin after Mom died, pouring his grief into every nail, every board. I'd spent summers there as a kid. the smell of sawdust and his Old Spice cologne filling the air, the sound of his laugh bouncing off the lake. Now it was gone, and Karen thought she'd won. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. I wasn't just going to take her down. I was going to bury her. The HOA's next meeting was a circus. The community center was packed, the air thick with tension and cheap perfume. Karen stood at the podium. Her smile practiced, her voice syrupy as she droned on about community standards. I waited in the back, my badge heavy in my pocket, Lila's folder tucked under my arm. When she opened the floor for comments, I stood. The room went quiet, chairs creaking as heads turned. "Karen," I said, my voice steady but laced with venom. "Care to explain why you've been stealing from the HOA for 3 years?" A gasp rippled through the crowd. Her smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. I laid it all out, Lila's evidence. The shell companies, the overpriced contracts to her husband. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough. Faces in the crowd shifted from shock to anger. Neighbors whispering, some shaking their heads. Karen tried to interrupt, her voice shrill now. "This is outrageous. He's lying." But I wasn't done. I held up the permit with her signature, the one that authorized the demolition of my cabin. "You destroyed my home without notice. Karen, you thought I'd roll over. You forgot who I am." The room erupted. Neighbors shouted, demanding answers. Karen's face turned ashen, her hands gripping the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I saw the moment she broke, the moment she realized she wasn't untouchable. Ruiz appeared at my side, his hand on my shoulder. "You good, Harper?" he murmured. I nodded, but my chest was tight, the weight of Dad's loss still heavy. This wasn't over. The investigation moved fast. With Lila's evidence and my testimony, the DA had enough to charge Karen and the entire HOA board with fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. The precinct was a whirlwind, phones ringing, officers pulling records, the clatter of keyboards filling the air. I worked late, the glow of my computer screen burning my eyes, the smell of stale pizza lingering in the bullpen. Karen's husband cracked first, spilling everything in exchange for a plea deal. The board followed, pointing fingers to save themselves. It was chaos, and I was the eye of the storm. The day of the hearing, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat. Karen sat at the defendant's table, her hair less perfect now, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. I took the stand, my voice steady as I recounted the demolition, the fraud, the betrayal. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The jury's faces told me everything: disgust, anger, pity. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, a murmur ran through the room. Karen's head dropped, her shoulders shaking. I felt no joy, just a hollow ache where my cabin used to be. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky bruised with clouds. Ruiz clapped my shoulder, his grin wide. "You did it, Harper. You took him down." I nodded, but my eyes drifted to the horizon, where the lake used to reflect the stars. I thought of Dad, his calloused hands, his quiet strength. He'd taught me to fight for what's right, even when it hurts. I sighed, the sound swallowed by the wind. "Yeah," I said softly, "but it doesn't bring the cabin back." Months later, I stood on the empty lot, the oak tree still standing, its branches swaying in the breeze. The HOA was dissolved, its assets seized to pay restitution. Karen was serving 5 years, her empire reduced to nothing. I'd won, but the victory tasted like ash. I knelt by the oak, my fingers brushing the earth where I'd scattered Dad's ashes. A bird called somewhere in the distance, its song sharp and fleeting. I closed my eyes, the smell of pine filling my lungs. This wasn't the end. I'd rebuild not just the cabin, but something stronger. A home, a legacy. Because no one, not even Karen Whitmore, could take that from me. Justice doesn't erase pain. It doesn't rebuild what's lost. But it's a start. And as I stood there, the weight of Dad's memory anchoring me to the earth, I knew one thing for sure: I'd keep fighting. For him. For me. For every underdog who's ever been told to sit down and take it. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of the lake. And for the first time in months, I felt something like hope.